Welcome to Ethics and Contemporary Thought. And I decided that for many, my hour-long ethics videos were a bit overwhelming. So while I'm live streaming with my class, I decided to do short 15-minute synopsises of those lengthy videos I have on my playlist and on my YouTube channel. And that's Darkwater Hermit if you're looking for it. One word, Darkwater Hermit, and you can find all the lectures there. So for ethics, we obviously have to start with defining what ethics is. And ethics is the theory of right conduct. We also talk a lot about morality, and even though many people use those as synonyms, in this class I will be trying to use ethics as the theory and morality as the practice. It's very interesting to me when you hear people talk about, oh, that person's so unethical or she's so immoral. Really what they're saying to you is that other person is not living up to my personal standards of right and wrong. I mean, they may be perfectly moral or perfectly ethical in their own ethical system, but not in yours. And so this class, I'm going to give you a sampler of 9 or 10 of the leading ethical theories, at least in the Western world. Hopefully I'll be able to add some more cultural diversity in ethics at a future date. That would be a fun class. Cultural ethics or something along those lines. Although there is an ethical theory that deals with that, and that is called ethical relativism. And basically that theory is saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans. Where we need to start, though, are some basic presuppositions. And in these presuppositions, they're kind of like preset ideas, almost like a pair of goggles you've been given at birth. We're all enculturated into a different culture or subculture, and they are going to tell us what is normal, what is true, what is good, what is evil. And it's very difficult, if you're not aware of this, to realize these are human constructs given by cultures and societies, but they do not necessarily correspond with reality. And so when I begin this class, we have to start with some very basic ideas like what is good, what is true, what is real. And you can imagine how loaded those are and how diverse the answers to those questions may be. I always like to start the first week of my ethics class by asking the students, how would you define good? And based on their answer, I can pretty much predict what their ethical theory is. And you'll be able to see how this is true. Some people will say God is good, or pleasure is good, or my self-interest is good. Well, all of those correspond to different ethical theories. And so it's in the first paper I've asked my students to write, I'm asking you all to write a personal ethic paper, just one sheet, and that's one of the first prompts I give you is how would you define the word good? Because based on that definition, it's going to tell me a lot about where you're coming from. In addition to the cultures in which we're raised, there's other presuppositions that are going to be involved in looking at an ethical system. And I spend part of the preface in the book, The Dead Have No Need of Ethics, which will be our textbook for this class, on talking about some major worldviews. I start in the center with the worldview of animism, and animism is the belief that everything is alive or has a spirit. But I want to qualify that. Virtually everything is alive and has a spirit. And I'm not just talking about people, plants, trees, animals, but I'm talking about even things like coffee mugs, the chair you're sitting in, the laptop you're using. All these things would be alive. But not everything is alive. There are some dead things, and they're dead because the spirit has departed. And I have had coffee mugs that have died. I've certainly had human friends and family who have died. And it doesn't mean they cease to exist, but it means they are now separated from their physical material body. Animism is found in many indigenous and tribal groups to this day, but talking to many missionary friends I've had and alumni, many of them tell me they believe this is the largest religion in the world, hence it would also be huge in affecting people's presuppositions and how they see reality. Now, an animistic worldview is kind of difficult to navigate because you're dealing with so many different spirits. So there can be a lot of fear, a lot of supplication, trying to manipulate spirits or trying to appease them. And this would be the role of like a shaman, medicine man, holy person. They would have a skill set of doing this. Now, animism, even though it still exists today, most places where we find animism in the world, there has been a veneer put over the top of it of one of the other major world religions. Now, the natural progression from animism is polytheism. And poly comes from the two Greek words, poly meaning many and theism meaning God. So polytheism means many God. And as you can imagine, for example, if we were in the classroom and I was an animist, I might have to spend the beginning of the class supplicating the spirits, the spirit of the carpet, the spirit of the chairs, the spirit of the whiteboard, the spirit of the projector, the spirit of the building, not to mention the spirit of all my students that are in the room. I mean, I would still be supplicating spirits trying to get to the lecture by the time my class time would be done. And so what the polytheists did was they sort of categorized or they elevated certain spirits, like Vulcan, right? He became the god of fire and also of like metallurgy and those sorts of things. Zeus, he became the high god, not just of storm and lightnings, but he was the high god of power. We had gods of beauty, of fertility, of war, all these different sub-things. And so instead of having to supplicate in the classroom, for example, every single object or every single sub-spirit, if I could tap into the goddess or god of education and become a devotee of that being, that god or goddess would take care of all the minion spirits. And so we see an elevation in Greco-Roman, Sumerian, Egyptian, around the world, different polytheistic cultures, of certain spirits into like deities or demigods, sort in between. Now from there, we can go either east or west. Let's start with the east. The Eastern religions all fall under the broad category of pantheism. Pan is the Greek word that means all or the world, and once again, theism. So literally, a pantheist believes all is God. So unlike the animist, who would say, this cup is alive, a pantheist would say, this cup is God. I am God, you are God, the cosmos is God. And the major traditions we see in this would be Hinduism, over 1 billion followers, Buddhism, hundreds of millions of followers, and Taoism. There are more like Sikhism, Jains, Baha'i, that would also fall under pantheism. But the big three, Hinduism, Buddhism, those are going to have a huge impact. Because imagine how different your ethics and morality would be if you believe that you indeed were God, and that as I'm lecturing to the students, I would literally be lecturing to different manifestations of myself. Think how differently you might treat people if you realize they were just another manifestation of you. That you are everyone and everyone is you. The universe am I. That's going to be very different from a Judeo-Christian ethic where you have a deity up here, right, and a creation down here, or at least how many traditional classic theists view the world. That's very different than if all is one and we are all part of this one event, one being, one time, one place. As we travel to the Western religions, however, we have what's called monotheism, and these are in the Abrahamic traditions. This would include Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And all three of these traditions believe in a transcendent God, but this God is also immanent. This is quite fascinating because those are two diametrically opposed terms. Transcendent means outside of or beyond. In this sense, we're referring to creation, where immanent means inside or within. So the Western traditions all believe in a God who is inside and outside creation simultaneously. So that's quite a trick, if you can imagine. But think how differently you're going to live if you believe there is a creator God who has made the world and everything in it for his glory, for his purposes. Well, who better to get to say the right way to live than that creator deity or that creator God? And so that is where we get things like divine command theory, natural law theory by Thomas Aquinas are tapping into this idea. If anyone has the right to dictate ethics and morality, it should be the one who made us. And in addition to these big worldviews, animism, polytheism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, think of all the other presuppositions that are going to affect the way you think about ethics and morality. Think how differently men and women think. We even have an ethical theory that's going to deal with that. It's called the ethics of care, where Carol Gilligan points out all these Western ethical theories are made by men, for men, and judged by men. But if women are human beings and asked to be part of this ethical process, why aren't we including their voices and their values into the conversation? Think about how race or ethnicity is going to affect your ethics. Think how growing up from a different perspective or background is going to affect the way you see the world. What's right or wrong, what's good, what's of value. Think of how socioeconomics is going to affect your ethics, right? Rich people are navigating the world quite differently than poor people in many instances. Their solution to problems might be very different than those of us who don't have means to deal with it in other ways. Ideologies, political parties, all these sorts of things, age, right? Mental ability, all these things are going to affect. Each one is like a pair of glasses that you're putting on and then trying to see clearly. And so part of what I'm going to do in this class is try to get you to take off a lot of your preconceived glasses, and we're going to go through these series of theories, and each time I teach you a new theory, it's like I'm going to help you put on a pair of glasses and say, look at the world through this lens. And so that is my teaching style. If you're not used to it, it will be first person. So when I'm teaching what is a Christian, I'm going to teach it from what I believe a Christian perspective is. When I teach you egoism, I'm going to teach it to you like an egoist. When I teach you natural law theory, I'll teach it like a natural law theory. And so if you ever want to know what I believe personally, you can email me or contact me, send me a message. But in the videos, it's kind of like method acting. I call it first-person teaching, where I will try to take on and give you the strongest version of each theory possible. And I'm almost to my 15-minute mark, and so since I do have some live students here, is there any questions you'd like to ask for clarification on this first part of the book? While you're thinking, I want to add another thing. Imagine how difficult it is to evaluate ethical theories without having a bias or presupposition, because we're all starting from a particular point of view, or we already have a particular ethical theory that we think is correct. And so how are we supposed to detach ourselves from that to then be able to be objective, dispassionate, open-minded to look at these other theories? So I'm asking quite a lot of you. I'm asking you to the best of your ability. I know as humans we cannot fully be objective because we're subjective individuals and we're always going to see things from a particular point of view. But I don't believe it's a black or white issue. I see objectivity and subjectivity more like a continuum or a spectrum. And what I'm going to try to get you from is completely biased, closed-minded, to at least move as close as you can to be objective, open-minded, to be able to look at things without bias and prejudice. And in doing that, at the end of each theory, I'm going to critique them. I'm going to try to present them first person like I believe in them, but then we'll step back and objectively look at these are some of the strengths of the theory, these are some of the weaknesses. And part of how you can tell if you're being objective is to simply ask yourself, would someone who disagrees with this theory and someone who embrace it come to the same conclusions? And that's good for video 1.